triumphantly returning to his show last night after staring down a government effort to censor and silence him. It's a Trump effort that first looked shockingly effective last week when corporate giant Disney gave in to the Trump FCC chair's blatantly unconstitutional demands that all legal experts who've seriously looked at this say would fail in court if they were tested in court.
Just when you thought the week couldn't get any weirder, Jimmy Kimmel strolls back onto ABC with the victory confetti still in his hair, and Trump goes nuts about it. Like, for real, this is one of those Trump loses at nights where the man is rage posting about lawsuits, ratings, and imaginary FCC superpowers, like he's trying to speed run a civics class he never attended. The hook here is simple. Kimmel came back, the monologue blew up, and the please clap crowd over at MAGA HQ responded with the classic combo meal of threats, whining, and more threats. According to reporting and analysis across ABC, MSNBC, and CNN, Kimmel's comeback wasn't just a segment, it was a statement. And the audience numbers were massive for a late-night return, especially online. And yes, a bunch of ABC affiliates still tried to keep him off the air in several markets, which only made the whole censorship storyline look worse for the people pushing it.
In a world saturated with information, finding the truth requires unwavering dedication and independent voices. America Facticity stands as a beacon for factual, unbiased reporting, delivering the stories that truly matter. Join our membership for just $9 a month. Your support helps us grow our team and create even better content. Find the link in the description below.
Because Disney first folded. Kimmel then stood strong, the censorship sparking a massive revolt that really did go beyond some of the many skirmishes we have in politics right now. And it led to Disney's then unusual reversal of its own suspension to start this week. And so after so many people, literally millions of people, had weighed in some way on this effort to silence Kimmel, I just want to remind you of something fairly basic, but that's part of the news. We tell you things that you might already have a hunch about. What we saw last night, Kimmel's return, is the first time he has addressed this roiling, ongoing censorship plot, the pressure on him and his team. So this monologue crystallized a free speech win against powerful forces. I'm going to show you some of the key points, because Kimmel mixed grace and appreciation with jokes about some of the absurd facets of what he dubbed a still quite serious struggle that's about a lot more than any single comedy show.
People have been asking me if there are conditions for my return to the air, and there is one. Disney has asked me to read the following statement, and I agreed to do it. Here we go. To reactivate your Disney Plus and Hulu account. I've been fortunate to work at a company that has allowed me to do the show the way we want to do it for almost 23 years. I've done almost 4,000 shows on ABC, and over that time, the people who run this network have allowed me to evolve and to stretch the boundaries of what was once traditional for a late-night talk show, even when it made them uncomfortable, which I do a lot. Every night, they've defended my right to poke fun at our leaders and to advocate for subjects that I think are important by allowing me to use their platform, and I am very grateful for that. With that said, I was not happy when they pulled me off the air on Wednesday. I did not agree with that decision, and I told them that, and we had many conversations. I shared my point of view. They shared theirs. We talked it through, and at the end, even though they didn't have to, they really didn't have to. This is a giant company. We have short attention spans, and I am a tiny part of the Disney Corporation. They welcomed me back on the air, and I thank them for that.
That's true. And he's probably not spinning there. He understands quite clearly in the larger economic math how that speck on the balance sheet could have been wiped away. But it wasn't, partly because people cared, partly because of you, if you cared. Kimmel summarizing that in a diplomatic way. The reporting and evidence we have suggests Disney was quick to fold to government pressure to oust him, only to fold again days later when the pressure in response proved mighty, and apparently surprisingly large for them. So Kimmel there thanking his employer, the broadcaster, thanking the public, and the many people who spoke out against this censorship. And I'm going to show you a little bit more of that point in a second. But again, we're balancing the big, weighty issues and the cultural moment. And so he made this other nod to a bit of TV lore and history when Tonight Show host Jack Paar had first returned to the airwaves after he'd previously walked off that show in an internal clash over editorial choices.
Anyway, as I was saying before I was interrupted.
As I was saying before I was interrupted.
If you're a real comedy nerd or history buff, you can feel the echoing there. And it speaks to something, that free speech and the ability to do this in whatever method people choose. Some people do comedy, some people do politics, some people are just artists and writers until they find the government comes for them too. This matters across history. Kimmel joking about how the government crackdown was going to grow his audience. Nicole Walls and I just discussed that with the TV ratings coming in. Last night's show was a ratings bonanza, 6 million live TV viewers. Online clips of this monologue are going viral, passing 15 million views on YouTube in under a day. The count is still rising as we speak and report. It's already now Kimmel's most watched monologue on YouTube ever. Now, that type of interest and response to people saying, don't watch this, or we might take this away, or the government doesn't want you to see this, actually matches a wider communications dynamic you might have heard of. When you try to suppress something, you sometimes draw more attention to it. This is called the Streisand effect. For a time when the star's effort to hide and suppress a single picture of her home ended up backfiring and drawing far more interests. So it is a fact that there's more interest in Kimmel's monologue, but, yes, but, I'm sorry, there's always a but these days. That still will only matter in reality if there is the freedom to find the material and get it. The Streisand effect does not work in North Korea or places with legal, practical tech limits on what you might find on your TV or on their version of what they call the internet, which is censored. Which is a point Kimmel also made last night, referring to autocratic countries and noting that while he is back on air right now, and you just saw the interest online on YouTube, many local affiliates are still today stopping Kimmel's show from being shown under this spat, impacting up to a third of ABC affiliates. There are signs, and some of this is still being reported out, whether that aligns with the MAGA government crackdown. So those are businesses making those decisions, but are they doing it for political and governmental efforts? Kimmel reflecting on that while guarding America's First Amendment freedom.
This show is not important. What is important is that we get to live in a country that allows us to have a show like this. I've had the opportunity to meet and spend time with comedians and talk show hosts from countries like Russia, countries in the Middle East, who tell me they would get thrown in prison for making fun of those in power, and worse than being thrown in prison. They know how lucky we are here. Our freedom to speak is what they admire most about this country. And that's something I'm embarrassed to say I took for granted until they pulled my friend Steven off the air and tried to coerce the affiliates who run our show in the cities that you live in to take my show off the air. That's not legal. That's not American. That is un-American, and it is so dangerous. Brendan Carr, the chairman of the FCC, telling an American company, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, and that these companies can find ways to change conduct and take action on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead, in addition to being a direct violation of the First Amendment, is not a particularly intelligent threat to make in public. Ted Cruz said he sounded like a mafioso. Although, I don't know, if you want to hear a mob boss make a threat like that, you have to hide a microphone in a deli and park outside in a van with a tape recorder all night long. This genius said it on a podcast. But one thing I did learn from Lenny Bruce and George Carlin and Howard Stern is that a government threat to silence a comedian the president doesn't like is anti-American. That's anti-American.
If by anti-American he means anti-American Constitution, fact check true. This is fundamental stuff. The Trump White House lost this round. They're backtracking now from the censorship goals they admitted in public, Kimmel pointing out that even nowadays, when MAGA may get away with a lot, that was too much, and that it was, as he put it, less than a genius move. But compare Trump's recent confessions that he will try to punish critical coverage by yanking broadcast licenses with what they're saying today. Having lost this round, well, they can't admit that they lost or that they had a censorship plot going, even though we all lived through Trump talking about it last week in his FCC chair. So briefly, I want to show you the misleading statement from the White House today, which is still a sign they know they're losing and need to say other stuff. They claim the whole thing was about ratings and not Trump's attacks on free speech.
They give me only bad publicity or press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away.
Take away their license because they're not covering the government the way it likes. That's the stated position of the president. And today, his spokespeople say the opposite, which, again, separate from the credibility, you'd prefer the government and the White House wasn't misleading so much, but that itself is a basically confession and awareness that they're losing this and need to get back off it because it didn't work, at least on this one, for Kimmel. Trump is still threatening ABC, though. Last night, as Kimmel was walking out, he posted an evening statement that he'll test ABC out. Let's see how we do. Last time I went after them, they gave me $16 million. This one sounds even more lucrative. And he means it. Trump proving the very point that so many have warned about, and that apparently Disney chief Bob Iger and others didn't understand. They are very smart, experienced people. They have a lot of strategic advisors around them, but they didn't figure out that surrendering and paying Donald Trump off only invites more attacks. That's true whether you're Disney or Harvard or some of these law firms that have not exactly cloaked themselves in glory or legal planning. Now, some big companies are going through this, their time in the box. I want to show a little more of something else Kimmel said that delves more into our side of the road, news and politics, because he very thoughtfully made a point using this big platform and audience to shout out some of the people who stood up for free speech values, precisely regardless of whether you agree with the said speech.
I want to thank the people who don't support my show and what I believe, but support my right to share those beliefs anyway. People who I never would have imagined, like Ben Shapiro, Clay Travis, Candace Owens, Mitch McConnell, Rand Paul, even my old pal Ted Cruz. I don't think I've ever said this before, but Ted Cruz is right. He's absolutely right. The President of the United States made it very clear he wants to see me and the hundreds of people who work here fired from our jobs. Our leader celebrates Americans losing their livelihoods because he can't take a joke. He was somehow able to squeeze Colbert out of CBS. Then he turned his sights on me, and now he's openly rooting for NBC to fire Jimmy Fallon and Seth Meyers and the hundreds of Americans who work for their shows who don't make millions of dollars. And I hope that if that happens, or if there's even any hint of that happening, you will be 10 times as loud as you were this week. We have to speak out against this stuff.
Powerful. Kimmel with the receipts, using his platform to acknowledge and thank the people who came up and stepped up for him, but also very aware of the way we live now and the career he's had. He knows how things work and how fast you can be hot or not or whatever, and saying, don't just stand up for him, stand up for these free speech values. And he seems to think, based on his experience, that Donald Trump's not done with this, that when he says he'll go after the parent company in other ways for money or a shakedown, that he will. That when he says he'll go after NBC or these other outlets, that he will. And that requires a sustained response. There's an old saying in politics that it's a thin line between the impossible and the inevitable, meaning sometimes something that you don't think could ever happen, happens. And when that thing is bad and you say, how is it that in America in 2025 you can have a leader who, whether you agree with his politics or not, it's not really the point, but you could have a leader who openly tries to abuse government power to sacrifice or end the very First Amendment of our Constitution, the basis for all the rest of our civic dialogue and democracy. How can that be inevitable? Well, that's where we are, and the rest is up, as Kimmel said, the rest is up to us. I want to bring in Vanity Fair's Polly Jong-Fast, an MSNBC analyst and author, and Michael Hirschhorn, who's here with his interesting portfolio. He has worked in anti-Trump democracy efforts. He's also a very, I would say, acclaimed, if it's possible, acclaimed reality TV show producer. A lot of people don't think of that field that way. But he created a lot of reality TV and has thought a lot about this culture-politics blend. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, culture is politics. And so I think it's right and important that you take this Kimmel story as seriously as, I don't know, Salt Talks might have been taken seriously 40 years ago.
And what did you think Kimmel was achieving last night, what he was expressing?
I think it was an important moment. I think it was something extraordinary. And it was something extraordinary because up to now, we've had this massive failure of elites. And across the board, nobody has stood up. Nobody has had guts until him. And he could have chosen not to do that. So personally, I feel like a little spring in my step. I got emotional watching him. How this plays out, as you said, depends on whether other people get any guts and whether there's a broader shift towards people sacrificing immediate self-interest and short-term gain for a longer-term principle.
Here was Kimmel on that point I mentioned on the ratings last night.
He had no talent, and more importantly than talent, he had no, because a lot of people have no talent, they get ratings. But he had no ratings.
Well, I do tonight.
Newsweek flat out reported that dozens of stations preempted or delayed him, which, cool strategy if your goal is to prove his point for him. And this is what he does, right? We've seen this pattern forever. Trump gets publicly clowned, immediately claims it's illegal, then threatens to sue whoever made him feel small. It's the same old playbook he ran on the press for years. He literally filed that $15 billion facepalm of a lawsuit against the New York Times, and a federal judge just tossed it as improper. Tossed, as in, sir, please stop wasting everyone's time. The Guardian covered that beatdown, and First Amendment folks at Fire have been explaining for years how these strong-arm censorship fantasies crash into constitutional reality. Translation, your feelings aren't grounds for banning jokes. So here's the evidence and the roast, the part you came for. Kimmel opens with grace, thanks the audience, tips his hat to the network for ultimately letting him back, and then drops the line that matters. Basically, I'm grateful. But this suspension was wrong, and we all know it. He riffs on The Tonight Show's Jack Paar, as I was saying before I was interrupted vibe, then walks through the absurdity of an American government trying to strong-arm private broadcasters over jokes. MSNBC amplified the free speech framing and noted the ratings surge on broadcast plus viral numbers on YouTube, which, again, is what happens when you try to censor comedy in a country with Wi-Fi. You get the basic Streisand effect. You try to hide a thing, it blows up bigger. Welcome to the internet, sir. And then, of course, came the meltdown. A very online, very all-caps Trump meltdown. Trump raged that ABC gave Kimmel his job back, threatened to test ABC out with another lawsuit, and bragged about a previous payout like he's the world's pettiest collections agent. It's the most on-brand thing imaginable. He keeps proving Kimmel's point in real time. Even Fox personalities had to, very carefully, acknowledge that overt government pressure on speech is a, constitutional faceplant. Ted Cruz, of all people, said government deciding which jokes are allowed is dangerous for everyone. When you've lost Ted, you might want to stop tweeting for 5 minutes and touch a pocket constitution. MSNBC rolled those receipts too. And look, because we actually do facts on this channel, here's the law part that matters. The First Amendment prohibits the government from coercing private platforms to suppress disfavored speech. That's not a fringe take, it's black letter law, reaffirmed by the Supreme Court as recently as 2024. The court has said, going all the way back to Bantam books, that government can't wield threats of legal action to strong-arm third parties into silencing people. That principle got fresh ink in recent cases, and it's not controversial on the court's current lineup. You don't have to love Kimmel to see the issue here. You just have to like the First Amendment more than you like seeing your political team win a news cycle. But sure, let's talk reaction. The White House spin was, no, this was about ratings, not censorship. Cute. Meanwhile, those affiliates that yanked Kimmel for reasons had to explain why the same feed could air everything else but the monologue skewering the president. And audiences noticed. The online clips detonated, the topic dominated cable segments, and the supposed blow to Kimmel became a rocket booster. According to ABC's own coverage and broader press, the court of public opinion went, "Yeah, we'd like to watch the thing you told us not to watch," and proceeded to do exactly that. The producer in me is like, "Congratulations, you invented the best ad campaign possible, banned by the president." Here's the bigger pattern, by the way. Trump threatens licenses, dangles regulatory pain, sues news outlets for reporting, and tries to kneecap critics with state power. Then he pretends it's all about fairness or ratings, but when those cases get tested, they tend to die. The Times lawsuit did. Other prior efforts have crashed into the exact legal wall we just discussed. And that's before you get to what seasoned media attorneys keep repeating on CNN and MSNBC every time this comes up, that coercion by threat is still coercion. You don't have to physically seize a transmitter. The government suggesting we can do this the easy way or the hard way is a constitutional problem all by itself. The Brookings Institution has literally been publishing primers titled How to Spot and Stop the Autocratic Playbook. And this is chapter 1. Bully the media, then cry victim. So then you get Fox. And look, Fox gonna Fox. Some hosts framed Kimmel's return as proof of Hollywood's anti-Trump bias. Others said the quiet part out loud about the government trying to clean up the airwaves. The narrative whipsawed so fast, they must have whiplash. First, it's he's failing, then his monologue crushes online, then it's okay but affiliates, then it's okay but ratings, then it's okay but lawsuits. Guys, pick a lane. Even Newsweek, not exactly Resistance Weekly, confirmed that a slate of ABC affiliates were blocking or time-shifting the show, which underscores the point that this wasn't just internet rumor. It was on the ground, it was happening, and it backfired. Now, the rewind. This isn't new. This is the same move he pulled against the press years ago, threatening to yank licenses, suing over stories he didn't like, calling for boycotts. The reason it feels worse now is because he's back in power, and the threats aren't just rhetorical. But again, reality check. The jurisprudence hasn't magically flipped just because Trump goes nuts on Truth Social at 1 a.m. The standard still says you cannot use state power to punish critical speech. Period. The court's contemporary free speech rulings from Bantam to modern iterations all draw the same bright line. That's why legal experts across the spectrum, including many quoted on CNN and MSNBC this week, predict these efforts would get wrecked in court. And that's why the Times just walked out of federal court with that $15 billion Trump tantrum tossed into legal compost. Let's talk Kimmel's own framing because it matters for what happens next. He thanked Disney for reversing course, sure, but he also said the quiet part loudly. He knows he's a small line item inside a mega corporation, and corporate fear was the accelerant here. Disney folded to pressure, then folded to a backlash. That's not heroic, that's reactive, but it's also instructive. Public pressure works, rating spikes work, advertisers reading the room works. Your outrage, your comments, your subscriptions, your attention, all of it is leverage. And if this swings back again, and it might, the only thing that stops future soft bans is making them more expensive than the heat they avoid. That's how democracies defend norms when institutions wobble. ABC, to their credit, used their own news platforms to push facts about the First Amendment fight this week. More of that, fewer indefinite suspensions. Meanwhile, the It's Just Jokes crowd is missing the point. Comedy is a delivery system for critique. It always has been. When power hears laughter, it knows the spell is broken. That's why authoritarians don't just sue newspapers, they jail comics. Kimmel closing his monologue by thanking not only allies but conservatives who defended his right to roast the president was the chef's kiss. That's the part I want people to hear. If Ted Cruz and David Letterman land on the same free speech square for one night, you're seeing the old consensus flicker back to life. And if you think that's corny, cool, enjoy corny. Corny saved your First Amendment this week. So what's the bottom line here? It's simple. Trump is like a guy who loses at open mic night, storms the stage, threatens to sue the bar, and then swears the mic stand is biased. It's never his fault, right? It's always the teleprompter, the escalator, the ratings, the affiliates, the deep state inside the laugh track. Meanwhile, the law is over here sipping coffee like, my dude, no. Courts keep swatting away these censor-by-threat fantasies, reporters keep winning in front of judges, and the internet keeps doing the exact opposite of what censors want. If the plan was to silence Kimmel, congrats on producing his most watched monologue ever. According to multiple outlets and ABC's own coverage, that's exactly what happened. All right, your turn. Did you watch Kimmel's full monologue? What was the one line that made you snort laugh, and what's the one part that made you go, yep, this is bigger than jokes? Drop it in the comments. Be specific. Hit me with timestamps. Tell me which affiliate you're in if your local station preempted it and what they ran instead. I want to read on-the-ground stories and shout a few of you out in the next video. And if you're a conservative viewer who still thinks Kimmel shouldn't be on the air, explain your standard. If Biden or any Democrat tried this exact play against Gutfeld, would you be cool with that? Let's have the argument in good faith. Keep it spicy, keep it smart. If you're new here, subscribe to America Facticity and ring the bell so you don't miss the next meltdown, because at the current pace, we're going to get another one by dessert. Smash like if you support free speech, even when the jokes roast your guy. And if you're feeling extra patriotic, share this with one friend who says it's just TV and make them watch the citations. We bring receipts here. According to CNN, MSNBC, ABC News, and even Newsweek, this wasn't vibes. It was verifiable, it was legal, and it was a clumsy government faceplant that ended with a comedian doing bigger numbers. That's America. Sometimes messy, sometimes loud, and on a good night, still funny. One last thing before we bounce. If you want a quick primer to send your butt-mo ratings uncle, point him to the First Amendment rule that government can't coerce private parties to punish disfavored speech. Court said it in the 60s. Court said it last year. They're probably going to say it again if this gets pushed. Book it. And yeah, we'll be here when Donald Trump goes nuts about that too. Time for the YouTube fam only. Subscribe, hit the bell, and drop free speech in the comments so I know you made it to the end. I'll pin my favorite rebuttals from both sides and jump in the thread tonight. Let's see if we can keep this one fun, factual, and, as Kimmel proved, very, very loud.
And remember, if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button.